as a circle. Now I'm going to stretch this circle about a little above the center of my page here. And I would say about the size of maybe a tennis ball, something of the sort. Now, key for these is to really lock your wrist and lock your elbow. Rotate all the way around through your shoulder. And very, very lightly touch your pencil to your paper. I'm adding in a bunch of circles here, more than one or two. Definitely just want to create very light, sketchy, little rounded shapes. The more lines you add, the easier it's going to be to kind of pick your favorites as we go along. Now we are going to be trying Pascal. We will be looking slightly to the right. So to add in what we call our guidelines, these are going to help me really show the direction that he's facing. So I'm going to stretch a very stretched out parenthesis shape over towards the right side of my circle here. Very long crescent moon kind of shape. And then my horizontal guideline is going to go a little below the center of my circle and just sketch across a straight line here, all the way from left to right. So we have a bow and arrow going through an orange or a tennis ball here. Now the first thing I want to do is chameleons have this kind of little bump on the back of their head. They're not completely rounded shapes. So I'm going to bring across from the very top of my circle, kind of extend that shape out here. And I'll do the same thing off the very back of my circle to create this little pointy bump here. Just blending that back in with my circle lines. Now, first features I want to add here for Pascal are going to be his eyes. Now, chameleons in general, and especially Pascal, he's got very, very big eyes. Now, this one over here on the left is going to be a circle. I'm going to have that sit right on top of that horizontal guideline here for him. And then the eye over on the right side is actually going to be an oval. Now, I want this to still be the same height as my circle, but since we're drawing him at that angle, we're going to be adding in a little bit of this kind of forced perspective. So this eye is going to appear to be a little bit smaller or skinnier than the other one. And I like to extend that on the outside of my head shape. Most chameleons, their eyes will sit like on the side of their heads, and they extend super, super far outside of their head shape. But we also need to give Pascal some pupils, right? Because he may look a little spooked if we just kind of left his eyes like this. So for his pupils, I'm going to add in these really big rounded shapes. Feel free to get creative though. You can do hearts in his eyes or stars in his eyes, maybe paint palettes or brushes or flowers or lanterns. Their options are endless for how you want to sketch these in. I'm just going to add in a very big circle here for the one on the left side. And then the one over on the right, I'm going to add in an oval and have that sit along the left side of that shape. This way it's going to look like he's looking straight at us, even though his head is turned slightly away from it. Now you may notice that these lines I'm adding in right now are looking a little bit darker than the ones that we've already started to add. And that is on purpose. That's because I'm now doing something called locking in my lines. I'm going to start with these pupils. That just means I'm going to use a little more pressure on my paper with my pencil to really darken in, thicken up, and really make these lines here stand out a lot more among the light, messy, sketchy lines here. Now that is definitely our ultimate goal, is we want to get rid of those really light, messy, sketchy lines, even though this is the one and only place in the entire Disneyland Resort where we are encouraging you to be just a little bit sketchy. Thank you, I'll be here all day. Everybody laughs, really keep it going, guys, thank you. But I now want to just go ahead and lock in the outside eye shape here for Pascal. Now with Pascal specifically, and pretty much with chameleons in general, they have these pretty defined eyebrows. Now Pascal is what we would call like a pantomime character, so he doesn't actually speak. And the way that he communicates is through his facial expressions and his body language. So for this kind of character, he really needs these tall, really expressive eyebrows. Now for his eyebrows, I'm going to add myself these little nostrils right on the inside of his eyes, right between them. And from the top of those nostrils, I'll bring up these tall candy canes that swoop around and meet to the top of his eyes here. Now I will add one in. The one on the right is going to look a little more like a candy cane. The one on the left will appear a little more like a rainbow. So very extended, just big curves reaching over to the side. Now these will really help Pascal kind of communicate, like I was saying. He definitely uses them with a lot of his facial expressions, whether he's happy, he's mad, he's angry, or he's judging you. He definitely is more of the, not the we listen and we don't judge. I think Pascal, he kind of judges, but that's okay. It definitely adds to his personality here. Now on top of those eyebrows, I like to add in some scales for him as well. So that again, just these little rainbow kind of shapes here and there to frame off the very top of his eyebrows. Now we also want to give him a pretty happy smile. You really can give him any kind of expression that you want. This is completely your drawing. You can do whatever your heart desires. I want to kind of show out his little underbite. He has a very little underbite here. So underneath that right eye, I'm going to add in a very flattened rainbow here. Just underneath that eye, underneath that guideline. And from the very end, that right side, I'll bring down a little swoop curve, kind of blend it back into the bottom of my circle. It's going to help extend that bottom lip out to give him that little underbite. And then I'll just add in a nice big stretched out letter S curve. Really creates this kind of soup ladle for his smile. And I'll bring that around and over to the left side of his left eye. You can start to lock that in. That line will just completely blend its way into his head shape circle. Now, Pascal is a chameleon, of course, and a chameleon is not a very conventional kind of pet, I guess you would say. I mean, this is a fairy tale land, but they originally were going to go with a very, very different direction when it came to the type of animal they wanted Pascal to be. Originally, he was going to be a little squirrel. They wanted Rapunzel to have this kind of simple woodland creature, little sidekick. And as they were kind of working with that, they realized that seems typical. I feel like we have done that before. We've had woodland creatures for our princesses. We need something different. And there was actually a storyboard artist working at Disney at the time who, it must have been Bring Your Pet to Work Day or something, but he brought in his pet chameleon, whose name was Pascal. And a lot of the animators and the artists absolutely loved this little guy, and they thought this would be the perfect kind of animal for Rapunzel to have. They could make him do very fun things, they could make him change colors and whatnot, and it was perfect because he could blend into his surroundings and kind of hide from Mother Gothel. So they decided to change the idea of squirrel, and they ended up with the little lovable chameleon Pascal that we know today. Alrighty, we finished the top of his sketch, which is basically just his head here. But before we move on to his body, just want to make sure, are we still doing okay out there? Yep. Yes? Awesome. We having fun? Yes. Perfect. That's the most important part, is if you're having a good time, that's literally all you need here for rough sketching. Just get your ideas on the page and have a blast. Alright, we need to go ahead and add in his body. Now for his body, his head is a lot larger than his body. So I'm going to measure out maybe about the size of his head and bring that down below his body. That's only about how big you want his body to be. Now for his body, I want to create this little orange sliced shape. So I'm going to come off the kind of left side here and bring down a diagonal line. And then I'll create that big parenthesis shape to give him that little orange or apple sliced body here. Now keeping this very light, so we do need to add in his little feeties as well. Now I like to add in a little ground plane for him, so just a bit below the bottom of that orange slice, I'll sketch across a very straight horizontal line. I'll add one more guideline, about a third of the way up from his body size. Now at this angle, we are only going to see 3 of Pascal's feet. So I'm going to give myself, right from the very back here, add in the 3 little lines. Right from the back of that body, I'll bring down one very lightly, one coming from the very front of his body, and I'll add one a little to the right side of the center. Now, he's got these interesting little toesies. Most chameleons have about like 2 or 3, they have like 3 little toes that kind of help them to clasp onto different things. So for these toes, I like to add in a little oval here. That's going to help me place in and get the kind of rounded shape here for his feet. Now all of his feet look the same, but I'm going to draw the back one in first, kind of walk you through it, and then we'll just copy the same thing basically. So right from that guideline that I added in, right off his back, I'm going to bring in a candy cane shape. This is going to be his back leg that kind of has that little curve in his knee. Now to separate those toes here, right on the inside of that oval, right in the middle, I'll just add in a little parenthesis curve here. And then lock in that bottom part here and show a little bit of a separation from the top, adding in these little letter U's, letter C shapes to give that separation of his toes. And then as I follow that bottom shape around, just add in his little heel and lock in only a little bit of that straight line. You don't want it to connect all the way back up to the top by his knee, but only a little smidgen of it there. Now, like I said, the other toes are pretty much the exact same thing. They're just going to be facing the other direction. So we'll still add in those little rainbows, well not rainbows, sorry, those little ovals for his feet. And then you'll just add in and sketch in the little toes. Now, Tangled is probably one of my absolute favorite Disney movies of all time. And one of the things that I really love about this movie is that it actually is the most expensive animated film ever. And there's a lot of things that go into why this movie was so expensive. But before I tell you exactly what, I want to try to see if you can guess. There are two things in 3D animation that are very difficult to animate. One of them is water, and the other one is hair. So think about this movie, think about the kind of character that we have in this film. What might have made this movie so expensive? Yeah, Rapunzel's hair. She has tons of it, and it was going to prove quite a challenge for the animators to really get her hair to work the right way. There were a couple people that were very adamant at first about not having Rapunzel interact with her hair. A lot of the animators and the people working on this movie were like, no, that is entirely too difficult. Her hair just on its own is going to be a pain in the butt. So we need to try to figure out some way to just have her hair exist. We don't want her to touch it, we don't want her to move it or do anything with it, we're just going to leave it. And there was somebody who had said, no, we absolutely need her to interact with her hair. She needs to use it, she needs to touch it, brush it, or else it's not going to be believable. It's not going to be the way that we need to see Rapunzel. So they ended up really challenging themselves here with that hair and really starting to find the ways that we're going to make it work. That's one of the things, like I said, about animation, especially with its hair in a 3D form, is every individual strand of hair basically is animated. So she's got hundreds of feet, I think, of hair, and it's absolutely crazy the amount of work that they had to put into that. Alrighty, adding in these little feet here, you should have 2 toes on each foot, and now we can go ahead and start to lock in the rest of his body. So I'm just going to lock in any part of that little orange slice shape here that is not being covered up by a leg for him. Alright, now we also need one more thing that's pretty prominent here for our little, it looks just like a frog at this point, which is what Eugene calls him. But what can we give to make Pascal look a little bit more like a chameleon? His tail, yeah. The way I like to add his tail is to just add in a simple little spiral, kind of coming off the back foot here, just to bring up a nice big rainbow letter C shape that looks like it swirls into a little swirly like a cinnamon roll. So I'll add in this little rainbow, and I like to add in a little swirl on the inside to show that it's folded around, kind of wrapped around itself. Maybe you want to get creative. Maybe he's holding a pencil or he's holding a paintbrush for Rapunzel in his tail. You can do whatever you want to really make this sketch your own. But we need to add in some more scales and stuff here for Pascal. He's got a few off the very back of his back here. So I'll add in kind of the same shapes we did with the eyebrow scales. And he also has some stripes. Now, most chameleons have this kind of pattern of stripes on their body. And yes, Pascal is a chameleon and he does kind of change colors and can blend into his environment. But one of the things that's very different about this Pascal than like a regular chameleon is he can actually change the pattern of his scales and stripes. Normal chameleons can't do that. They can only kind of adjust their coloring. But Pascal can actually change his shapes. He can change them to look like flowers. He can change the pattern, which allowed the animators to get a lot more creative and kind of add in a lot of fun little kind of pieces here and there with the way that Pascal behaved and the way that he could blend into his environment. Alrighty, add in some little kind of parentheses, curvy letter V and triangle shapes here for those stripes along his back. And for a little bit of extra credit, I can shade these in. But anything else you want to add, it can be extra credits. Maybe you want to draw some of the other buddies in the background, maybe Maximus, the horse. Maybe you want to give him a little frying pan. Maybe you want to draw in some of the lanterns in the background as well. Like I said, anything else you want to add is extra credit. Very last step you'll need is to find a spot and sign your name. I like to add in those lanterns here. Those lanterns were also another thing that made this movie extremely expensive. That scene has about 45,000 animated lanterns in it, which is absolutely crazy, but absolutely beautiful. Alrighty, go ahead.